Florida Governor Ron DeSantis learned an important lesson this week. Don't mess with the mouse. The Walt Disney Corporation has come out on top in the ongoing power struggle between the company and DeSantis to control the board that controls the independent area that houses Disney's parks in the state of Florida.
It's so amusing to see you here, Ron, taking a big public dump. Looks like your board has no power now, Ron. You thought that you won, but you're trumped. There's no one around as repugnant as you. You're the worst people's favorite guy. Your poll numbers fell even faster than Jeb, and it's not very hard to see why.
Please clap.
No one panders like Ron, gerrymanders like Ron, stuffs himself into blue jeans and boots quite like Ron. Well, he looks like a cheerleading wussy. In baseball, he can't catch or pitch. Hey guys, look, I'm Top Gov like the movies. But everyone knows he's a fat, whiny bitch. No one knows picks like Ron, shoots Ozempic like Ron, eats chocolate pudding with fingers like Ron. An embarrassing troglodyte meatball baby. Half-witted asshat, that's Ron. Incompetence that's unsurpassed. A sentient pockmark on Florida's shit.
The last thing we need to do is to monkey this up.
No one's vapid like Ron, soft prick flaccid like Ron, gets his candy ass pounded by Disney like Ron. Oh, wifey, please help me, our dreams are dying. Mommy, what a schmuck that Ron.
Welcome to Because Miami, an embarrassing troglodyte meatball baby that also describes Billy Corben and I. Ron DeSantis, very bad week for Ron DeSantis. Where do you want to start on the very bad week for Ron DeSantis? You've told us before, Billy, the history of Disney in Florida. Disney kind of checkmated Ron DeSantis. He's new to the power game, the evil game.
Who do you root against here, Dan? I don't know.
Well, you tell us. You tell us briefly some of the history, but tell us about the week. What just happened to Ron DeSantis? Because you don't beat Disney on its home court.
Yeah, I mean, Disney owns Florida. Everybody knows that. But I will tell you, Ron DeSantis took a real 1-2 punch here from Disney, basically neutering his board, heading them off at the pass before they were even before the legislation was even signed into law. Disney was already with the Reedy Creek Improvement District passing their own rules that would put them in charge and neuter the board for decades to come, or until King Charles's last living descendant dies or whatever craziness they put into that contract. But yeah, you're not going to... I've been wondering this whole time how there's no way Disney goes down. Disney's going to beat him at his own game. And I've been wondering what they had up their sleeve. And it turns out they did it all in plain sight. This is a public board. They do public notifications. They have public meetings. They're all online. So, like, all of this was done legit and on the up and up. And Ron DeSantis got just absolutely smacked. The funny thing about it is he doesn't really care. This is all, like, culture wars bullshit for him. And a lot of his legislation gets killed in the court system anyway, and we're the ones, of course, paying for the attorneys to fight these unconstitutional laws that the GOP legislature passes and Ron DeSantis signs. But this was such a public embarrassment. He's got to do something about it. The second thing, the 1-2 punch, the second punch is, of course, Trump getting indicted and arraigned in New York this week. I say 1-2 punch because conventional wisdom amongst Republicans.
It's an amazing thing to say. It really is.
Oh, that's a political advantage?
It's unbelievable.
Well, look at Hialeah. The Miami of today is the America of tomorrow, Dan. Raul Martinez was not only arrested and charged, he was convicted and reelected after he was convicted.
You're saying, and are not wrong, you're saying publicly that Ron DeSantis' bid for power and presidency was derailed or harmed before he even announced by the fact that his chief competitor in his own party was indicted. It's asinine.
Right. Well, first of all, we are still a long ways away from the primary season, so a lot of shit can go down. I think Ron DeSantis is just hoping that Trump will get indicted in Georgia, which is likely. He may get indicted by the feds. He's hoping for those other indictments, some of which I think arguably be more damaging, particularly amongst independents, where by the way, Ron is also not very popular. The only person less popular with independents than Ron DeSantis is Donald Trump. But Ron DeSantis is wildly unpopular with women, which is extremely difficult to overcome, and it's because of all this bullshit, patriarchal culture wars nonsense. Like on the same day that they passed or that he signed permitless carry in the state, the Florida House and Senate passed a 6-week abortion ban. So people don't like this. So I don't think that Ron DeSantis or Trump really have a chance in the general, but the base of the Republican Party is not sophisticated enough to say, let's choose the candidate that has the widest or broadest appeal for a general election. That's not what they're doing. They're just getting fed red meat, and they're just absolutely devouring it. And that red meat includes they love a strong man, Dan. They love a strong man. And if you're getting politically persecuted, in their words, by some Soros-funded liberal prosecutor in New York, then you must be our guy.
But explain to me and the audience, please, when you say they love a strong man, what just happened to make the strongman of Florida, wins huge, seem like a weaker man? You're saying an indictment of a president and you're not as strong as Disney are enough are enough to derail what people are considering the chief threat in the party to Donald Trump.
Nationally, yes. In the state of Florida, DeSantis is still wildly popular. I think he has like a 59% approval rating. There was a new Florida poll released on Tuesday. There was a new Florida poll released this week from Mason-Dixon that has DeSantis at 44% and Trump at 39%. But that's Florida only. When you look at nationally, the Center for American Political Studies at Harvard poll this week shows Trump at 50% and DeSantis at 24%. So yes, this is embarrassing to Ron DeSantis, this Disney situation. This is embarrassing to, I would say, the National Republican Party that Donald Trump is a criminal. But that's the other thing to remember about Donald Trump. He didn't become a criminal when he was running for president. He didn't become a criminal when he was president. Donald Trump was always a criminal. Everybody who ever knew him was aware of that. Everyone who ever did business with him knew that. Everyone in New York real estate knew it. Everyone in the golf course business knew it. Everybody in the Atlantic City casino business knew it. Everybody knew he was a con man. Everything he ever did failed. If he had just taken the money from his father and left it sitting in the bank, he'd be richer now than he is. But they loved that. They loved the idea that they were voting for the monopoly man. It was the idea of what middle America thinks a rich person is like. They're mean and they're spiteful and they're racist and they're misogynist and they're anti-Semitic. And they loved that about him. And they still love that about him.
We are going to get to, in moments, our crew here, Mike Ryan, Billy Gill. Some of them think you're a killjoy about the University of Miami and in general about doomsdaying.
I know.
Things.
Mike texts me all the time about it.
We're going to get to that in a second. But before we do, because I think you are a precious, precious resource in South Florida as a historian, as someone who fights for the right things, even though he always loses. Just explain to people, always loses to the corruption, always loses to the evil. It's almost not a fair fight. Billy is trying to hold his hands up and hold back something that he can't win against because he's getting engulfed by people without moralities. But just explain to people as a historian, I know we've covered some of this ground before, just the deal that Disney has with Florida and how Disney outsmarted him because, of course, they're better at the doing of business than someone who doesn't actually care about the power. He's just signaling to everybody that he's willing to fight Disney.
First of all, I have to shout out Carl Hiaasen, who has an amazing, very short book about this. It's almost like an extended essay called Team Rodent, How Disney Devours the World. And it's all about what Disney did here in Florida, which was incredibly brilliant. You know, Uncle Walt started quietly buying up lots of land in Central Florida, mostly swampland, land nobody wanted. It's in the middle of a peninsula, Dan. It's an hour away from the nearest beach. It's totally undesirable, you know, in that time period in the 50s and 60s. And so he starts buying it quietly under LLCs, you know, mysterious companies with weird names, and like Reedy Creek Development and weird shit like that. Nobody knew who it was. The next thing you know, he's got more contiguous lots of land than probably any landowner in the entire state of Florida. And that's what would eventually, in 1971, become Walt Disney World, which was only on a tiny percent of that land. And that's how they've had so much room to grow. That's why theme park after theme park after theme park continues to open. And when you go there, there's still miles of grass and hills and highway. And you're like, wait, all of this is Disneyland? They haven't even developed to this day. It seems like a fraction of that land. And what they did as well is they were able to make a deal in those days with the state of Florida government to effectively have their own government, their autonomous government, the ability to tax themselves, improve roads and infrastructure. And incidentally, they've done it better as a private company with an interest in that property than the government probably ever would have done, to be fair to Disney. But there is also something to be said for the fact that there might be a legitimate policy goal here, Dan. If the Republicans wanted to come to the table and say, hey, listen, Disney has had it too good for too long. We need to amend. We need to improve. We need to create a better deal with Disney. And we need to reform the Reedy Creek Improvement District. That's a legitimate policy goal that we can then have a conversation about how best to achieve that. That's not what they did, Dan. What Ron DeSantis said was, I didn't like that this company, who has a First Amendment right to their opinion, came out against my Stop Woke Act, okay, and don't say gay, and they expressed an opinion, and I want to punish them for that. And I want to do it in the quickest, sloppiest, dumbest way possible. And so he got outflanked. He got outplayed. And he did that because he did it so stupid. These are not people in the Florida Republican Party or really in the National Republican Party who have good faith, who want to have conversations about how to get to policy goal. Listen, John F. Kennedy said that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal. And if you start there, you can say, okay, we can have ideological disagreements on how to achieve certain goals. But let's have a healthy policy debate. You can't have a policy debate with people who think JFK Jr. is alive. These are not people acting from a place of good faith. You can't have a good faith argument from people who think that women should die of sepsis and carry a dead body in their bellies for months and months because whatever. You can't have good faith arguments with people that think that you need a military grade weapon to protect your home.
I have failed here because one of the things I'm trying to do, maybe this will be easier when we move into new studios, is harness the fire hose that is the fire hose of righteous outrage that is Billy Corben, and trying to break up tonally that with
Nazis are his base.
every time DeSantis's name is said, we're supposed to play that.
Yeah.
Or that, and I failed to play either of them.
We got a new one.
You're goddamn right, meatball.
That's not quite as produced.
Nazis are his base. Christo-fascist.
Yeah.
You're goddamn right, meatball.
We visit DeSantis-stan next.
The free state of Florida, most free of any land. A proud phallic peninsula, our home DeSantis stand.
So his royal coward just signed Florida's permitless concealed carry bill into law behind closed doors. That means that in order to bring your gun to the grocery store, you will not need training, fingerprints, or a permit. Yes, you heard that right. You'll need more training to cut my hair than you will to bring a loaded gun with you to Publix. Florida requires 1,200 hours to get a license to cut hair, 500 for massage therapy, 240 hours to do nails. Again, 0 hours of training for a loaded gun in public. Some background, Florida has been under Republican rule since the 1999. So yes, the late 1900s. In 2005, the legislature passed the so-called Stand Your Ground law. In 2007, they made the names of concealed weapons permit holders secret, even though some had criminal records. The Guns at Work bill was passed in 2008 over strong opposition from businesses, followed by a law prohibiting doctors from asking patients whether they own guns. And then the Parkland shooting happened in 2018. Then Governor Rick Scott signed into law the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act, which made 3-day waiting period for gun purchases, raised the age to purchase from 18 to 21, allowed the arming of some school employees, and grant law enforcement the ability to seize firearms from anyone deemed to be a danger to themselves or others. Ron signed permitless carry into law without any big media attention because he knows it's not what most of us want. Data from a national survey conducted by Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Policy and Research found that 83% of gun owners and Republicans agreed that in order to conceal carry in public, a person should first be required to pass safety tests and demonstrate lawful gun use. It's about to get real crazy here in the Sunshine State because states where permitless carry is legal, they saw a 22% increase in gun homicides right after the law's passage. And it's only going to get worse.
The disenfranchised and the woke cry when their books are banned. A Christo-fascist paradise here in DeSantistan.
Our guest on the Because Miami podcast this week is a survivor of the 2018 massacre at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. He's the co-founder of March for Our Lives, one of the most important protest movements of our time. He's the co-writer with his younger sister and fellow survivor of the best-selling book, Glimmer of Hope, How Tragedy Sparked a Movement. He is 22 years old, and he is one of the most inspirational voices of his generation. David Hogg, thank you for joining us. Thanks for having me on. I want to ask right out of the gate, another day, another mass shooting, another week, another mass shooting at a school, most recently, where you were recently in Tennessee and in Nashville, 3 9-year-olds dead in addition to staff and teachers and the head of the school. How does it make you feel, just personally, when another one of these tragedies, I almost hate using the word tragedy. It makes it sound like it's uncontrollable. It's just a random sort of thing that happens. So when another one of these massacres happens, how do you feel about it in your life and your activism?
Well, first, Billy, I just want to say it might have looked like I was on the ground in Tennessee, but I am a college student, so I wasn't there, but I was posting a lot of videos from people, including our staff, that were on the ground helping lead those walkouts. I would have loved to have been there. I would love to be there right now. It's just I'm in my final semester at school and I got to balance that. But it makes me feel awful. I'll tell you what, though, this one felt different for me. And the reason why it felt different is because I woke up after the awful news of what happened in Nashville, and I just decided that I had to do something different. I think we all have to do more, and we have to do things different, right? Because what we have been doing hasn't been working. And I thought, in my position, I've said the same things over and over again. How can I change this conversation more? And I actually decided to change the conversation more by going out this past weekend and going skeet shooting with a friend of mine who's been skeet shooting his entire life. I grew up around guns. My dad was an FBI agent. I would often come home from school, several times a year after he would be shooting for quals, and he would be cleaning his guns. And I think I wanted to show people that, it's possible both to, my family owns guns. It's possible to own guns and support common sense reforms, right? Like here in Massachusetts, where I'm speaking to you from right now, we have a gun death rate 70% lower than the rest of the country. 70%, right? You can still get a gun here, and it's not a super easy process, but guess what? These are guns. It shouldn't be a ridiculously easy process. It shouldn't be like going into a store and just getting a pack of Tic Tacs or anything like that. These are weapons made to kill, and we need a clear process to make sure that only the people that are going to practice responsibility with these are going to be able to get these weapons that are so dangerous in the first place.
Thank you for correcting me. You're not on the ground in Tennessee, but it is you are talking to us from your dorm room right now. I mean, it is somewhat remarkable, this life that you lead. And I wonder, when walking around on campus in your non-activist life, do people know who you are? Do people approach you? Do people want to talk about this issue? Do people want to tell you to go screw yourself? How does that work?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes there are people who come up to me and want to tell me to go screw myself plenty of times, as we've seen from Marjorie Taylor Greene and many others. But there are also people who are also supportive. But I really think, Billy, the thing that we need more of in this conversation about what we're doing about guns in this country, what we're doing specifically about gun violence, is to have a dialogue and less debate. I don't think that just arguing about this is going to get us any further here. I'm interested in figuring out what we can agree on and moving forward from there. Even if I don't agree with somebody, that I think that an AR-15 should be able to be purchased by, an 18-year-old just as easily as possible, like the shooter at my high school who was 19 did with his. I've come to see a lot of the people who very ardently disagree with me. Not as people, that hate me. Obviously, many of them do, though, but as people that I just haven't had the chance to talk to yet. I want to point out, too, the majority of gun owners are not members of the NRA or any major gun organization. The majority of Americans support stronger gun laws. And I think the majority of gun owners do support, these common sense solutions moving forward in the first place. It's an extreme minority that are defining this debate for us and are derailing any progress on this issue.
Sure. Who are the Americans that want their children to die at school? Nobody wants that to happen. But the cynicism of this, because the NRA, which is basically a failed organization from an organizational standpoint, was incredibly successful from a culture wars and ideological standpoint, where they've changed the conversation somehow. I mean, the AR-15 has been around since the late 1950s, early 60s. It was a military weapon. Then the M16 basically replaced it. It became, in its quote-unquote semi-automatic form, a weapon marketed to police and then ultimately consumers. And it was popular, but sales were kind of flat until the assault weapons ban sunsetted in 2004. And then all of a sudden, this trade group and this group turned it in. And the cynicism of it was all marketing. It was all to sell these guns, which went from basically less than 200,000 AR-15. And again, for everybody who wants to call in is going to give me shit about this on the hotline. AR-15 style. It's like saying Kleenex. I know it's not literally an AR-15, but we all know what we're talking about here, okay? It's like saying Kleenex or Coke. We know what it means, okay? So the point is that less than 200,000 of these things were sold in like 2003, 04. And the next thing you know, less than 10 years later, they're selling 2 million of these things. But now NRA feels a little sidelined to me, but you still have these people, these proselytizers, though, who almost religiously, in a zealous way, say that this is our symbol of freedom, is what this is, as opposed to a military weapon of death. How do you combat that?
I think it's about reframing the conversation. Like I said, in Massachusetts, we have gun laws and it's not easy to get a gun in the state. But again, I cannot name a single gun owner that believes that doesn't know a single person that should not have a gun in the first place. What scares me about this, and what I think we're getting at here, Billy, it's not anything about responsibility. It's about salesmanship and selling as many of these guns to as many people as possible, even if that means irresponsible and dangerous people are getting them right in the first place. Right. Because I believe, unlike an iPhone with the guns that they're selling, an AR-15 doesn't break down in 2 years. It doesn't. So you have to keep selling them, selling and expanding that market more and more to sell them. How do you do that? You have to weaken gun laws to sell more guns, to enable more gun violence, to scare more people, to sell more guns, to enable gun violence, and repeat that cycle and just churn out more and more guns as there's more and more death, to basically bring America to a point where every single person thinks they need to have a gun in order not to die at the supermarket or the grocery store or anything like that. And it's insane. Responsible gun owners, like most of my family members, believe that there should be a stringent process that ensures only responsible people are getting these guns. Because the world that Ron DeSantis is trying to create is essentially one where little brawls that can happen at a little league match or a soccer game between the referee or the umpire and a hothead parent who is taking the game way too seriously turns in not just into a fist fight at worst, but potentially a gunfight. Because you don't know if these people have guns in the first place because of the things like permitless carry. And that is the entire purpose here. The purpose that Republicans are pushing for is not responsible gun ownership. It is irresponsible salesmanship to anyone that can get a gun in the first place to scare more people and sell more guns. Because contrary, as my final point, Billy, contrary to what most people believe, when there is a mass shooting, gun laws actually get weaker after that. And it results in more violence and more sales. And they're trying to bring us to this place that is not a land of law and order. They're trying to bring us to a place of total chaos and irresponsibility where anyone, even the most irresponsible and dangerous person, can get a gun. It's ridiculous.
Well, I'm talking to you now from a place where people take sports way too seriously, and I don't think any of them should have guns, but you're absolutely right. We're talking about turning Florida into Dodge City, into the wild, wild west. And what you said is absolutely true. After these mass shootings, the conversation is somehow insanely that more guns will lead to fewer shootings. More guns will lead to fewer people firing those guns and killing people with those guns. It's not a real, that's the thing. How do you have a real conversation with people who think that more guns are the answer, who think that permitless carry, there's no such thing as constitutional carry. Call the hotline and give me shit about it. There's no such thing as constitutional carry. It is not in the Constitution. It is simply not. You've been lied to if you think that. The Second Amendment is entirely in the context of a well-regulated state militia. It does not say that you can have a Stinger missile or a tank or a Black Hawk helicopter and fly it around to your heart's content. It simply doesn't say that. It's not true. How do you reason with people who think these school shootings didn't happen and you're a crisis actor? How do you have a serious policy? I understand debate is healthy and policy discussions can actually make laws better. You and I may have a wrong idea. Maybe there's a way to improve upon these ideas with some pushback and healthy debate. But how do you start?
Well, I think, first of all, it's not taking that extreme fringe of people who do not represent the vast majority of responsible gun owners seriously. We need to have more responsible gun owners in this conversation that understand that, sure, if we need to have a more straightforward process, if we need to wait 10 more days to get a gun and that can help reduce gun suicides and domestic violence and murder, we're willing to do that because we understand that this gun ownership is not just about an individual's responsibility when they have a gun to make sure that their guns are locked up and kept away from ammunition so a kid doesn't get a hold of it. It's also about a collective responsibility in the first place, right? It's about the collective responsibility of our society to ensure that if you want to get a gun, it's ensured that you were responsible, that you were going to be safe with it, that you were trained with it.
Right.
What we need to do is recognize the vast majority of gun owners, even in a state like Florida, do not support permitless carry.
Right.
And to allow these people to have this kind of platform and legitimate their extremist views and act like they speak for the majority of gun owners is frankly ridiculous. And we need to make sure
70%.
Billy, we need to make sure that more gun owners like yourself are showing up at places like Tallahassee and saying, yes, I am a gun owner. Yes, I support responsibility, but I also understand that if there needs to be a couple more steps to ensure that my kid gets to survive kindergarten, I am willing to do that. And I think every responsible gun owner supports that in the first place. That's the conversation we need to be having. Because the reason, Billy, why they bring up these crazy, ridiculous conspiracy theories is because they have no argument. Because they know after a school shooting, whenever they say you can't talk about this, you're politicizing this. What do you do, Billy, when the very kids who went through that school shooting, the mass shooting generation, what do you do when those kids are speaking up and walking out of their schools and saying we demand action? You have to do something truly despicable, which is convince people that those kids don't exist, that they work for the CIA or the FBI, so that the smear becomes the story and the students' voices get lost. The kids and the victims get lost and we don't remember them, so that smear is the only thing you think about in this conversation and not the very logical things we're talking about here. Common sense things like needing references if you want to get a gun to make sure that, there's a common sense process in the place to ensure responsibility. We need to take this conversation back from that extreme fringe of gun owners who don't represent people like my family or yours, Billy, and make sure that the average gun owner in this country who is not a member of the NRA is front and center in these conversations as a representative of gun owners and not some extreme fringe.
Last month, a poll from the University of North Florida Research Institution in the Panhandle showed that 70% of Floridians are against permitless carry. 70. So when you say majority, there's not 70% of Floridians that agree on anything, but we agree that we should. And of course, they passed it. It was quietly signed, and it could get so much worse. How does that make you feel when we take like half step forward and then like 10 steps back, and people want to have a conversation about mental health? And it's not the fact that we now have millions of AR-15 style weapons, across this country. It's that mental health is apparently deteriorating. Like, I don't want to not have a mental health conversation, but how is it not the guns, the access to the guns for people with poor mental health?
Yeah, well, I think it's important that we have both conversations, but at the same time, we acknowledge the fact that what mental illness, right, is not what causes somebody specifically like the shooter in Buffalo, who is a self-declared white supremacist, to go and commit that act. Hatred is not a mental illness. And we do, at gun owners, responsible gun owners, need to have this conversation about mental health, but with nuance. 2/3 of gun deaths in this country are suicides. We do need to fund mental health more to address those. The community of gun owners need to have a conversation in the first place about what they are doing, what people like the members of my family who own guns are doing, to ensure that we are practicing the best mental health practices we can as a society and putting that forward, but not just acting like the only like anybody who's mentally ill is going to be a perpetrator of violence. The vast majority of people who have mental illnesses are not going to go and harm somebody else. They're far more likely to harm themselves. And that's what gets lost in that conversation. But at the same time, like you said, we do need to talk about the fact that it's not just about why somebody pulls the trigger. It's about how they get a gun, right? In threat assessment, it's often talked about where you need to talk about capability and intent, right? We need to talk about the intent. Why is somebody picking up a gun? Why are they pulling the trigger? We need to address poverty, systemic inequality, bad schools, lack of resources, all of that stuff. But we also need to address the capability, the fact that a 19-year-old was able to buy and obtain an AR-15 and shoot up my high school. Despite making multiple threats against my school, he was able to continue to own that gun. That is insane, right? We need to talk about the fact that they say gun laws don't work, Billy. I want to tell you a story. Somebody threatened my mom and sent her a death threat that said, I can't say this on air, but said an expletive with the NRA, and you will be dead on arrival, or DOA. We used the law that we passed after Parkland to disarm that individual. That same law has now been used over 9,000 times in Florida. That's a law with due process and a right to counsel that was passed by our then Republican state legislature and signed by Governor Rick Scott. That ensures that there's due process and a right to counsel, and that it's not just an instance where your neighbor gets mad because you mowed part of their lawn and now they're going to call and want to take your guns away. That's not at all what's happening here. There is a straightforward process that has due process involved to make sure that people like the shooter at my high school can't continue to have an AR-15 if they threaten to shoot up a school multiple times, right? It's common sense stuff like that, but we need to change this conversation in that we need to have gun owners, the majority of gun owners who do support these common sense laws, say, no, the NRA doesn't speak for me. The NRA doesn't speak for my family. I speak for me. Responsible gun owners speak for themselves. And we, as a community, like my family members, have a responsibility to go out there and talk about how we can make sure that irresponsible and dangerous people are not getting guns. What they're fearing here is something illogical, which is that we're going to come and take everybody's guns. First of all, there are multiple Supreme Court cases that stand in the way of that, along with the current court.
Of course.
On top of that, there are 400 million guns in this country. The U.S. government can barely keep itself funded. If you think it's going to be able to take away 400 million guns, you need to go and take a logic test, because that's just illogical in the first place. But that just detracts from the fact that that is a theoretical situation, right, that people are afraid of. They aren't talking about the reality of this situation, in that 2/3 of gun deaths in this country are suicides, and our kids are fearing for their lives every single day in their schools.
So fixated on the science fiction of the government coming and taking away our guns and not dealing with the reality of people dying every single day in these mass casualty incidents. David Hogg, marchforourlives.com. Good luck to you. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
After many, many months, we have finally got a complaint line up and running. You are using it. It is 786-505-9842. You can call whenever it is you like to yell at Billy and me and this echo chamber. You want to be different in the echo chamber? You can say things that echo around here. 786-505-9842.
It is a hotline. It's heating up. It's getting better every week.
It is getting hotter now. I'd like it to be much better than it is so far. I'd like it to get much, much hotter than it's been.
Insufficiently caliente.
But we've got a couple of calls to get to. Again, the number, 786-505-9842. 24 hours a day. You can call and yell whenever you want. But John Ruiz, the sugar daddy for the University of Miami program, is a very polarizing figure. You have been lukewarm on this person at best. We will bring in Mike Ryan at one point here.
I'm a healthy skeptic.
Mike Ryan will be here shortly to yell at you as the golden
John Ruiz's nephew,
the golden cane booster that he is. But first, let's go to the hotline.
This is Justin in Washington. As a Christian and a political moderate, I really genuinely appreciate a lot of the perspectives and the stories that you guys tell, and I agree with about half of it, but I do genuinely typically appreciate the approach of the show in general. Actually, as someone from Washington State, I can say the caller from Seattle last week said that there's a lot of corruption in Seattle, and that is absolutely true, but it's liberal corruption, so you guys wouldn't care about it at all. Billy, you definitely wouldn't care about it. You probably wouldn't even consider it corruption because it's from your side of the aisle. The reason I was actually inspired to call was not that at all. It's about Billy. You, Billy Corben. You present yourself as a blowhard and a jackass who's mostly concerned about sounding smart by using clever quips and fancy vocabulary words. And mostly, I find it kind of funny, your little comments about the victims of the killing at the Christian school as, quote, they just didn't pray enough. Did you think that was clever or funny? Like, what exactly were you trying to accomplish by saying that? And in addition to being disappointed in you, because you are constantly calling out public officials for dehumanizing people, and then you say something like that, Dan just glanced over it, and additionally, I was disappointed in Roy for not saying anything as well. So that's my complaint with you, and you can make whatever justification you want, and hopefully it's a good one. I'll hang up and listen.
I agree with that caller.
What? Disappointed in me?
Yeah, I'm disappointed with myself.
I agree. I agree with Justin. I blame Dan and Roy.
I blame everyone here. He's flippant and condescending. And you're flippant and condescending about prayer and the religious beliefs of others as well.
I will respond in order. First, he agrees, he said, with half of what's on the show. That's 50%. As we know, in a Miami-Dade County Public Schools grading curve, that's like a B+. So I'm proud. I'm proud of that. The second thing I will say is he says that I don't care about liberal corruption because it comes from my side of the aisle. In the words of Tim Rice in the hit musical Chess, nobody's on nobody's side. I don't really have a side of the aisle. It's part of the frustrations with me as an American. But hang on. I don't care about liberal corruption. Justin's from Washington State, so I understand that he doesn't know a lot of the characters that we talk about down here on the show, Dan. We have all the local races in Florida are nonpartisan. So when I call out Daniela Levine Cava, she's a Democrat. When I call out Dan Gelber, he's a Democrat. When I call out Keon Hardeman, he's a Democrat. When I call out Michael Grieco, he's a Democrat. When I call out Christine King, she's a Democrat. When I call out Kristen Rosen Gonzalez, she's a Democrat.
Are you going to do that?
No, I'm just getting warmed up.
No, you're going to itemize. Like, I don't want to do the hotline this way.
But
they talk for a minute and a half, and you talk for 27 minutes.
No, what I'm saying is, wait a second.
Fuck that 7 times over. That's not how we're doing hotlines. They tease you, and then you go for 40 minutes.
I don't care about liberal corruption. Most of what I talk about on this program is liberal corruption.
They didn't pray enough.
And lastly,
it's an uncool thing to say.
And lastly, in reference to the Nashville Covenant school shooting, my comments are not in a vacuum. My comments are in a greater context of how I feel about this issue, which I think is very clear and on the record. That was a commentary on people who respond to these tragedies as if they are unavoidable, as if there is no legitimate policy that they can institute to not alleviate, but perhaps reduce these incidents and save the lives of children and educators and parishioners at churches and people in synagogues where these mass shootings happen on a daily basis in this country, and think that nothing more than thoughts and prayers are what they should do to stop these things.
That's not what you said, though.
That's
not what you said.
I understand.
You were sarcastic and flippant about, I guess they should pray more, and I understand the complaint, and I understand
what I'm saying is there's context. That's all. And I also understand that it may have been missing, but I am not the one who is not doing something. The same people who say, now's not the time to inject politics. I don't know why it's politics, because it's public health and safety is really what it is, not politics. But the same people who know that with an assault weapons ban, they can save hundreds of thousands of lives, instead offer nothing but thoughts and prayers. And so my question is, when it happens in a Christian school, when it happens in a synagogue, when it happens in a church, why aren't the thoughts and prayers working?
Which is why I brought it up in the first place. And yet I'm getting blamed for it as well. So.
I agree with Justin. It's absolutely Roy's fault and Dan's fault.
And my fault.
You just sat
agreed.
There.
Let's get to the next one.
Listen here, Billy.
Yes.
There's only 2 people in this world who have been known to actively attack the money that the kids are getting at the University of Miami. And that's you, Mr. Videographer, and that's you, Mr. Pell Grant. You're always messing with the kids' money. You claim to be so pro-player, and you want them to get paid, and you want anarchy. But as soon as there's a little bit of anarchy and a little bit of chaos, you want to turn that U upside down. So do me a favor. John Ruiz got the men's and women's team to make deep runs in college basketball. So do me a favor, get down to Coral Gables, put an ibis on your chest, and throw a damn U up. Throw it up! Throw it up! I dare you!
I really thought when he was going to say, do me a favor, I thought he was going to say, keep John Ruiz's name out your fucking mouth. I really thought that's what he was going to say. I really did.
Another caller who is right about Billy Corben being a killjoy.
Mr. Pell Grant.
What is that? What does the 1994 Pell Grant scandal have anything to do with this?
Because he wrote about it.
Well, here's the thing.
Oh,
Roy,
you're Mr. Pell Grant.
No, you guys.
You're
Roy,
a killjoy.
No.
You're a hater, Dan.
No.
Why are you trying to sink this program? He's right for 30 plus years. You've been trying. You platform me. You outed your own dorm mates, at the University of Miami.
Listen,
you betrayed them. You stabbed them in the back. People went to jail.
The hotline
For
is
defrauding the federal government.
786-505-9842.
I'm turning your mic off.
And I will just say to the audience before we bring Mike Ryan in here to yell at Billy Corben again. The Pell Grant story was not mine. I was beaten on that story by Randall Mel of the Sun Sentinel.
What kind of journalist are you? It
Well,
was
he's
right
not
under
here
your
to
nose.
defend himself.
It was right under your nose, and you missed the story.
Roy
It was like
doesn't even know
Watergate
it
all over again.
because Roy is also an asshole.
It was right there. It was happening in your dorm room, and you missed it. You
Not
missed
my
the whole
story.
What kind of journalist you call yourself a journalist? That's outrageous.
I got beaten on that story. I don't understand how people
How
say.
do you get scooped right there? It was right happening right in your campus.
You ruined the program. No, I was following Randall Mel's story.
You and Uncle Luke.
Not my story. Billy, I am tired of our group, our circus group of feces throwers, when you're not here, ripping you for being an unhappy doomsdayer.
Oh, I don't listen to the show, so I don't hear it.
Neither does my wife.
Nobody's wife listens to the show.
No, that's not true. Not true at all. Nope. Mine does.
Don't get off topic here.
Sorry.
The show has talked behind your back about you being a joyless killjoy who wants Miami destroyed, both the program and the city.
Wait, the University of Miami, which program? The basketball or the football?
All the programs, the sports programs.
No, clearly I'm to blame if anything bad goes wrong with the sports programs. Clearly that's all my fault. Clearly, for some reason. I'm not exactly sure how that tracks.
It just seems as though you revel in whatever benefits your beefs. And if something comes out negative about John Ruiz or his company does something that many companies do, which is postpone revenue meetings, you kind of take a weird victory lap on it, and it's just odd. Like, it's not the time to be discussing LifeWallet's quarterly earnings or lack thereof. It's a time to just be happy and celebrate the 2 single best basketball seasons that the men's and women's programs have ever had. You're just a killjoy who never backs a winner and generally seems miserable to me.
Wow. Okay.
Good. I'm so happy I said that. Over the air. I mean, I text you this all the time, but...
He does text me that all the time.
Does all the time.
But I'm not rooting for anybody to lose. I'm not rooting for LifeWallet to lose. I'm certainly not rooting for student athletes in this program to lose. And in fact, that's where my advocacy is. I was an advocate for NIL rights.
Right.
I'm an advocate for student athletes to be compensated fairly for their
aware that
their work. I believe they work.
Yeah, you're aware that they're being compensated for their work. They're being paid. I know that you have this fear, and you may believe it to be truly valid that they're going to be left holding the bag one day. That day has not yet come. So you can
You can tout your fears, but it's not a reality. They are getting paid.
The program is running on the money of John Ruiz, whether you think it's real or not money.
It's not just running on the money of John Ruiz. It's not.
But he's paying people, not just him, but he is paying people.
LifeWallet is paying people, yes.
That money is now real.
It has been. It's been real the entire time. And I do think that there is a future in which that investment, like any kind of seed money, because he's really building out LifeWallet, will draw back some. And I think it's incumbent upon the program and the boosters to get really active and find other people to contribute to the pot, which they have. I think we're in a good place there. But so far, John Ruiz has really helped the basketball programs and the football programs, even though we haven't seen wins or losses. By the way, did you guys see the Middle Tennessee State Hawaii Bowl championship rings? First off, they were giving away championship rings for Hawaii Bowl, and I totally understand that for Middle Tennessee State. You're going to find this laugh out loud funny. Do you know what the final score is on that ring?
No.
It's not the Hawaii Bowl. It's the Miami game.
It's the game.
Miami's logo is on there with the final score of that Miami game. It should be noted their head coach is a former FSU quarterback.
Billy should get one of those rings.
There's a lot of money that's real until it's not real anymore. LifeWallet has lost over 90% of its value since it debuted on the stock exchange last year.
Welcome to the world of SPACs, my friend.
It is, well, you said it, not me. You also use the term left holding the bag, and that's what we see time and time again. Miamians we're often guilty by geography. We attract a certain number of shady people and unscrupulous people. They wind up surrounding our institutions. They wind up financing our politicians. They wind up supporting our athletics departments and programs. And more often than not, it is not the universities that are left holding the bag. It is not millionaires and billionaires that are left holding the bag. It winds up being taxpayers holding the bag. It winds up being student athletes who don't have the ability to fight or to even afford to pay back, claw back litigation from bankruptcy trustees.
If I may, this isn't just a Miami thing.
Okay.
Student athletes being promised one thing and then having whoever promised them that not come through. It's more common than you know.
What I'm talking about,
it happens all the time.
Miami has how many publicly traded companies are headquartered in Miami? It's somewhat rhetorical. I don't know the answer to that, but it can't be that many. It's a pretty extraordinary and special thing. They make a big deal out of it. Mayors make big deals out of it. Politicians make big deals out of it. You get to ring the bell at NASDAQ. The truth is, not one but two of those companies, LifeWallet, aka MSP Recovery, and now Cano Health, who have contracts with each other. Cano Health is down, I believe, 87% from its all-time high. Its most prominent investor, billionaire Barry Sternlicht, very dramatically resigned from the board last year, saying that he does not trust the CEO. He's running the company into the ground, according to Sternlicht. And most importantly, he cites irresponsible deals that the company has done specifically with MSP Recovery. So don't take my word for it. People don't value my opinion. People in this country value the views of the rich and billionaires. They instantly demand respect. They instantly demand rings, whether it's the Hawaii Bowl, whatever the ring is, be kissed. They demand, they don't earn it. They just say, I have a lot of money. And this is what the Canes holes do on Twitter. They say, we pay fealty to people who are rich simply because they are rich. They don't care where the money comes from. They don't care if people will be held accountable for it later that aren't the people responsible. But you now have a situation where, take it from this billionaire who's lost over $1 billion investing in this company, Cano Health, and says in no small part it's as a result of irresponsible behavior on the part of the CEO, which includes doing deals, in his own words, with John Ruiz and MSP Recovery and LifeWallet.
I understand why these companies are under your microscope, not just because the Canes connection thing, but also it's Miami-based news. This is, again, more common than you know in the wonderful world of SPACs and the bubble burst.
But it's not a wonderful world of SPACs. Most SPACs, or many SPACs, I should say, were schemes. There were schemes that got insiders
we're talking about
rich.
Reputable companies like Lucid Automotives that have come down from 90% from their high.
What we're talking about is both hurricane teams made big
Right.
runs in the tournament.
Right, Dan.
That's
because
what we're talking
he's
about.
Like he's saying, don't take
There's-
my word for it.
that's
There's all
what we're
these
talking
cautionary
about.
tales, and here's what I'm
Mike,
telling
right
you.
now-
There's plenty of places you can go to celebrate what's good at Miami. If you want restaurant recommendations, if you want fanboy podcasts, and if you want to follow realtors on Instagram to see all the beautiful drone shots of Miami, all of those places exist. I serve a different function.
It's a good time.
I serve a different function. That's all.
Yes,
there's
and
plenty of
your
places
function
to
is
celebrate
a killjoy. It's a killjoy who
Again,
has his
Miami,
own.
Miami is a place where the
Don't
truth
say
is,
the
truth
sunny
is
place
hate.
for shady people,
no, where
please.
where the truth is hate and lies are love. Where we don't have reality, we have realty. Where if you tell the truth about what this place
These
is
are all
and
derivative
who
of that.
these people are, then you're just a hater. I'm not being a hater. I'm being a truth teller. That's all
But,
that
but
it is.
also the truth. Final Four and Elite Eight.
Yes,
Also
best
the truth.
seasons ever.
Great.
And Life Wallet has
and,
all
and
these deals with
nobody's
these players.
celebrating that. And nobody's celebrating that. Nobody's
No,
celebrating
no,
that.
everyone is.
You guys give the
But
coach
you're-
a well-deserved
you're
standing
not.
ovation on this show.
You haven't. You haven't
What does that
celebrated.
Give him a standing ovation.
You
give
haven't-
La-
yeah,
give
I
Larinaga
demand-
that standing.
Katie
and
Meyer.
now he's standing.
Yes.
You can't tell with me, Dan.
Yes,
You can't
Celebrate. That's all we wanted.
Thank you.
A little bit
Hey,
of joy.
we did it right.
There is joy.
We took care
Look
of our
at it.
student
Why does
athletes.
he look so enraged?
We took care of
Look
our
at
student
him.
athletes.
He's a killjoy.
All the checks cleared.
Yes.
All the checks
yes,
cleared. Everybody got
yes,
paid. Guess what?
Yes.
Guess what? We're talking to other people. Maybe Zay Wong comes back.
Some checks cleared.
Some checks.
yeah,
some
or the early check cleared. Yes.
Some checks cleared.
Yes.
Some checks cleared.
Yes.
The early
Some checks cleared.
Some checks cleared.
Some checks cleared. So far, there hasn't been a check that hasn't cleared from this arrangement. So
Well, they haven't been delisted yet.
well,
The year is young.
He
Enough.
cashed out.
Final Four.
Money's real.
Elite Eight.
Yes. On the
Mazel tov.
there we
Yes.
go.
Joy.
Joy.
Jewish joy.
Joy.
From the soul.
Joy.
Well, you
It's
did.
Passover. There's
Passover.
no joy on
No,
Passover.
no, there isn't.
It's miserable. There's
All right.
plagues. There's 10 of them.
That should be your name.
We should do Miami. We do 10 plagues of Miami.
Plagues and Passover. The Billy Corben story.
Pestilence and we did not have time this week to cover Miami Tech Month yet, or the CEO who moved to Miami and then defrauded JP Morgan out of $175 million. We didn't have time to talk about the truck driver who stole $168,000 of Red Bull. It wasn't me. We didn't have time to talk about the investigation launched after a hidden camera was found in the bathroom at Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Station, number 69. Nice. We didn't have time to talk about the fact that there's more on this Miami city attorney and her husband and Mayor Francis Suarez defrauding or targeting. We didn't have time to talk about new development in Miami city attorney Vicky Mendez, her husband, and the mayor exploiting their public position for private profit by preying on elderly residents in a house flipping scheme. We didn't have time to talk about the two Miami police officers, whistleblowers who were suing the city of Miami, claiming that Chief Morales retaliated against them after they called out corruption. But speaking of billionaire Barry Sternlicht, he was on CNBC this week, and he was asked basically if why New York sucks, and if you were in charge of New York, what would you do? And he compares New York. He basically says that New York sucks and Miami is so much better. But the reason why he says it's so much better, really, he says the quiet part out loud.
I mean, it's funny. I had a friend had an accident in Miami over the weekend. He almost got killed by a driver, and the police were not acting quickly enough. And I texted a friend who texted the mayor, and the mayor was on it in 5 minutes and got the police. I mean, that can't happen up here. One of the things, it's not just the tax rates; it's the how they value success, and the American dream is still alive in many of these red states. In the blue states, they've basically said business is evil. And that seems to be the narrative of one of the parties. That's just absurd.
Except for Disney's not evil anymore because they push it back against DeSantis.
How do you go after Mother Pie and Mickey Mouse?
Well, you do.
That's right. He's basically saying that Miami is better than New York and values success because rich people can text the mayor for help, because that's how Miami really works. Millionaires and billionaires get whatever they want, and the government and police department works for them, while the rest of us in one of the poorest cities in the country are just left to just stop being poor, right? Right, Roy? In the mortal words of the mayor, stop being poor.
Yep.
Because Miami, cocaine's.